At a high school in Texas, where students learn calculus formulas before they learn how to face bias, something happened that felt like a scene out of a movie. A 13-year-old black girl, holding a box of homemade cookies, walked through the school gate with a radiant smile and left with her hands in cuffs. Not because she did anything wrong, not because the box contained anything illegal, but because she didn't match a police officer's mental image of what an innocent child looks like. And the very moment those cuffs clicked onto her wrists, the entire system was forced to stop and look in the mirror. Because sometimes, what shocks us isn't the crime, but how power defines guilt based on skin color. Today's story isn't just about a police officer and a student. It's a mirror reflecting an America where justice sometimes wears the wrong uniform. And real justice showed up in the form of a cookie box, a phone switched to record, and a little girl who refused to be silenced. If you've always believed that school is the safest place for students, then maybe you haven't been to Roosevelt High on a Monday morning. 7:35 a.m. Madison Clarke stepped off the big yellow school bus, a black backpack slung over her shoulder, earbuds in, playing a playlist titled Power Moves Only. Her cornrow braids were neatly tied back, and her eyeliner was as sharp as a rebuttal at a debate meet. She was the captain of the debate club, the daughter of the vice chair of the State Board of Education, and most importantly, the most prominent black student at a school where the multicultural club had exactly 3 members herself, a Filipino student named Ronnie, and a torn-up poster in hallway B3 that read, "We celebrate diversity." The sky was clear. Birds were chirping. But there was one person who didn't seem to enjoy the peace. Officer Brad Tucker, the newly assigned campus police officer. Word had it, he was from Alabama, where his friendly smile usually came with the question, "So, what neighborhood are you from?" A question that always carried a racial undertone. Tucker stood at the school gate, one hand resting lazily on his belt, his eyes scanning student faces like a barcode reader. But when he saw Madison, he straightened up as if he had just spotted a giant wanted poster. "Hey, you there?" "Hold up a second." Madison removed one earbud, raising an eyebrow. "Yes? Is there a problem, officer?" Tucker stepped closer, his gaze practically shouting, "I smell trouble from a mile away. Where are you headed?" Madison glanced around and then pointed directly at the school gate, the one with a massive sign that read, "Welcome back, students, to class." "Like every other student?" Tucker didn't smile. "Let me see your ID. And open your backpack." You were looking around suspiciously. Suspiciously? Madison had never been accused of anything so groundless and, frankly, so absurd. "Officer, I just got off the bus. My music's still playing. The only thing I'm hiding is a bento box and an AP calculus textbook." Tucker smirked. "You know, innocent people don't usually feel the need to explain themselves so much." Madison laughed, but it wasn't a laugh of amusement. It was the kind of laugh you reserve for a system that's gotten far too comfortable looking at skin color before looking at a student ID. Madison stood in the middle of the school courtyard, the morning sunlight filtering through the old oak trees, casting a scene that looked peaceful. But the air around her was anything but. Officer Brad Tucker hadn't taken his eyes off her, as if he were staring at a walking indictment. "Open your backpack." "I'm not joking, young lady," Tucker said, not loudly, but just enough for the students around them to slow down and turn their heads toward the two of them. Madison bit her lip not out of fear, but frustration. Patience, her mother had taught her, was a subtle form of resistance. But right now, she might need something more than subtle. "Officer, may I ask the reason? Does this school have a random search policy I haven't heard of?" Tucker raised an eyebrow. His eyes glinted with the look of challenge. "You know what? I have the authority to search if I detect suspicious behavior." Suspicious? A female student of color, in full uniform, wearing her student ID, holding a copy of Advanced Grammar and Argumentation. Madison knew this wasn't the first time something like this had happened to someone who looked like her, and it wouldn't be the last, unless she did something about it. "Officer, I think we should invite the principal to join this conversation. I worry if we continue, this might evolve into a case study on racial profiling." Her voice remained calm, her gaze steady, but the words landed like a gentle slap, articulate, yet stinging. Tucker flinched slightly, then quickly hardened his expression. The air between them began to thicken, not because Madison had done something wrong, but because she hadn't, and she still dared to speak up. "Are you threatening me?" he asked, his eyes narrowing, though something flickered in them a hint of doubt. Madison replied flatly, "No, I'm simply planning to document this and include your signature." Around them, a few students began pulling out their phones. A group of Madison's friends, including Ronnie and Jada, co-founders of the Equality Now Club, stepped closer, their eyes sharp and alert. Tucker noticed. He was no longer alone in this narrative. The morning sunlight still shone golden, but the glare of cell phone cameras was much sharper. Students began to gather in a quiet circle around the courtyard. Phones were raised, cameras recording. But in that moment, Madison wasn't standing in the middle of a crowd. She stood between two worlds, one called justice, other prejudice in uniform. Officer Brad Tucker began to move, slowly but deliberately. He approached the 15-year-old girl as if closing the distance might somehow make him more correct. "I won't be lectured about the law by a disrespectful kid," he said, voice hoarse and clenched. Madison didn't flinch. She stood tall, her gaze strangely calm, as if she'd been preparing for this moment her entire life. "And I don't think an officer should forget how to speak to a student who isn't even old enough to drive," Madison replied, softly but by no means weakly. A quiet "ooh" rippled through the crowd. Jada tried to stifle a laugh, while Ronnie had already started live streaming. Tucker raised his hand, reaching toward Madison's backpack. That motion, seemingly simple, carried the weight of a small earthquake in this charged atmosphere. "Don't do that," Madison said. It wasn't a threat. It was a warning, delivered with dignity. Tucker paused for just a second. 1 second. Then he did something no teacher, no parent, no sane citizen would have expected. He yanked Madison's backpack from her shoulder, threw it to the ground, and dumped all of its contents across the school courtyard. Everything. Scattered like a declaration of insult. Silence fell. Only the sound of wind flipping through notebook pages remained. Among the scattered belongings, a notebook popped open Madison's journal. A small folded piece of paper slipped out, with scrawled handwriting. "Dear future me, please don't forget how brave you are." Jada gasped. "Did he seriously just do that?" Ronnie turned the camera on himself and whispered, "Twitter's gonna be wild tomorrow." Madison didn't rush to pick anything up. She looked up at Tucker, not angry. No tears. "Officer Tucker," she said, her voice unnervingly steady, "I hope you enjoy your primetime debut." And at that exact moment, another voice cut in, sharp as a blade. "What exactly is going on here?" Everyone turned their heads. From the doorway of the principal's office, Assistant Principal Pamela Lee, a black woman with her hair in a high bun, heels clicking in crisp rhythm, was striding forward, Starbucks cup still in hand. Assistant Principal Pamela Lee didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. Her mere presence froze the entire courtyard, including Officer Tucker. The Starbucks cup in her hand was still steaming, but her gaze was colder than the ice inside it. "Officer Tucker," she said, calm and unwavering. "I was just called out here because a student was being searched in public. Why is Madison Williams being treated like a criminal on this campus?" Tucker smirked, a bad habit he hadn't learned to control. She refused to cooperate. There was reason for suspicion. Suspicion? For wearing a backpack? For being a black student? Or simply because she looked out of place to you? Pamela replied, each word like a silent arrow. The crowd began to murmur. Some students turned to each other and whispered, "Ms. Lee just switched to full attack mode." Ronnie had already locked the camera in place, zooming right in on Tucker's face. Jada, standing next to Madison, whispered, "She's Wonder Woman without the cape." Tucker began to feel his badge was heavier than usual on his chest. I followed procedure. And I believe procedure doesn't include dumping a student's belongings onto the ground in front of the entire school, Pamela said, stepping over to Madison and picking up her journal with both hands, a small act, but one that carried the weight of an entire system, taking a long look in the mirror. She handed it back to Madison, her gaze softening. "You all right?" Madison gave a slight nod. "I'm good. I'm just watching him play the lead role." The courtyard erupted in laughter. A few students echoed, "Got him!" like a chorus. Pamela stood upright, her eyes still fixed on Tucker. "I'll be filing an official report with the county police department, and I sincerely hope that next time you feel the urge to assert your authority over a student at this school, you remember that no one here has forgotten how to read. Especially the law." Tucker looked around and realized no one was on his side anymore. Even a few teachers standing at a distance were shaking their heads. A school bell rang, signaling the start of class. But no one moved, because what they had just witnessed was more valuable than any lesson in a textbook. Madison bent down to pick up her books. Jada and Ronnie helped her. She didn't say thank you, not out of rudeness, but because, in that moment, solidarity was the highest form of gratitude. Vice Principal Pamela Lee walked back across the courtyard like she had just stepped out of a UN summit. Calm, unhurried, her heels clicking rhythmically against the concrete like war drums. Coffee in one hand, name badge gleaming, oversized sunglasses on. No one was sure whether she was there to mediate or to laser blast injustice on the spot. She stopped, standing squarely in front of Officer Tucker, who now teetered between authority and absurdity. "Officer Tucker," she said, her voice smoother than the jazz they played during first period. "I've just been notified that a student was searched publicly because she was wearing a backpack and had a face that appeared untrustworthy. Please help me identify which clause in the Education Code permits that." Tucker inhaled the kind of breath people take before releasing grade 4 class nonsense. "I had professional intuition. The girl was acting suspicious." Pamela raised an eyebrow and sipped her coffee, as if assessing whether it was strong enough to deal with this level of nonsense. "Professional intuition? You mean a combination of skin tone and posture irritated your sense of control?" Students held their breath. A teacher accidentally dropped a pencil. Ronnie whispered, "She just activated Beyoncé, Academic Edition." Tucker growled, "I was doing my job." Pamela gave a small smile, the kind only a woman who's chaired disciplinary boards for 15 years could master. "You were doing your job. I was doing my duty. The difference is, I don't misuse power on a child eating a sandwich." Jada stepped forward, phone still recording. "Ms. Lee, the audio's crystal clear. Google's gonna thank you for this one." Madison remained silent, not out of fear, but because her eyes were saying it all. I don't need to shout. I just need to stand here long enough for you to see who's really shaking. Pamela knelt and picked up the book Officer Tucker had thrown earlier. She gently dusted it off and handed it back to Madison with both hands. You okay? I'm fine, but my math homework isn't finished yet. A student giggled. Jada mumbled, She dropped that comeback smoother than a TikTok filter. Pamela turned to Tucker. I'll be forwarding a formal report to the County Police Department and the Office of Human Rights. And if you need a copy of the anti-discrimination statutes, I've got a few printed out on recycled paper. Good for the environment and your career. Tucker turned red not from shame, but because he'd just been stripped of his last excuse. And maybe, just maybe, because he was starting to realize, when your witnesses are 300 Gen Z students with phones and Wi-Fi, lying isn't exactly a wise tactic. The bell rang again. Students began to leave the courtyard, not in a rush, not in panic, just with the quiet awareness that they'd just attended the most important lesson of the year. You don't need a uniform to be decent. You just need to not stay silent. Jada, the school's unofficial camera queen, sat on the stairwell, opened her phone, adjusted the brightness, added a caption, and hit post. No yelling, no rally needed. She simply uploaded the footage of Officer Tucker rifling through Madison's backpack in the middle of the schoolyard. The title? When your skin color is the only reason you're a suspect, welcome to Liberty and Liability High. Within 20 minutes, the video had 8,000 views. In 45, it had over 500 shares with hashtags like #BeingBlackAtSchool, #HandsOffOurKids, Tucker Tumbles, #Not Just Another Incident. A verified Twitter account commented, If this is what counts as emotional intelligence training for school officers, I'd like to propose a basic human rights course. Meanwhile, a mom in the Conscious Parents of Texas Facebook group posted, I send my child to school to learn letters, not to learn how to stay silent when treated like a criminal. TikTok, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube Shorts. The entire internet turned into a public notice board that no one dared to take down. In the school security office, the phone rang non-stop. The front desk assistant hung up and sighed. 27th call so far, and not a single one about a lost uniform. They're all, we'd like to file a complaint in the name of justice and underage students. Madison, though silent, became the central figure of the most watched video in the school's history. In the clip, her eyes seemed to pierce right through the lens. No begging, no resistance, just a silence that made people feel ashamed of what they had done or let slide. A 9th grader, famous for editing anime clips, synced the footage of Madison's backpack being searched with Andra Day's Rise Up. The caption? One person stood up for the crowd, too tired of bowing their heads. And Jada? She sat cross-legged, bubble tea in hand, answering a local reporter's questions like she was taking a sociology final. We didn't record this to create drama. We recorded it so people can stop pretending to be blind. The principal received an email from the City Department of Education. Subject line, Request for clarification regarding abuse of power and signs of racial discrimination in an educational environment. One parent commented, below the viral clip, I used to tell my kid not to film at school. Now I tell them to charge their phone before leaving the house. Monday, 7:45 a.m. The schoolyard, usually noisy with the sound of sneakers squeaking and vending machines chirping as they dropped sodas, fell completely silent. All eyes turned to the bulletin board outside the principal's office, now bearing a bold new message. The school board will hold an emergency meeting regarding the incident on the 23rd. All relevant parties are required to attend. The word emergency had never carried so much meaning. Inside the second-floor conference room, the atmosphere was thick. Dean Brody, known for wearing ties that said "respect the rules" for the first time in his career, had no idea when to nod. In front of him sat Madison Daniels's student file, next to a printed screenshot from TikTok. The meeting chair, a black woman with salt and pepper hair and eyes sharper than any line from How to Get Away with Murder, opened slowly. Before we begin, let me remind everyone, if you've mistaken authority for the right to insult, please step outside and reread the First Amendment of the United States Constitution. A light cough. Someone wiped sweat from their brow, even though the AC was set to Antarctica. Officer Tucker was invited in. For the first time, his gaze no longer had the air of a patrolling enforcer, but that of a man who had been reverse patrolled by the internet for 72 straight hours. He began his defense. I was simply following protocol. The student's behavior seemed suspicious. A board member raised an eyebrow and asked, "Suspicious how, sir?" She was eating an almond cookie and nodding to music? The room shifted not from laughter, but from the weight of truth, finally landing where it belonged. Madison's voice played from the clip. "I didn't steal anything. Why don't you check someone else?" That question no longer echoed only in the conference room. It now hovered across the schoolyard, in parent group chats, and in the minds of all who had once turned a blind eye to moments like this. The district's legal counsel chose their words carefully. Officer Tucker's actions were not only lacking in legal grounds, but demonstrated targeted selection, a behavior we've fought for decades to eliminate from our schools. Officer Tucker remained composed, the kind of composure held by those unaware. They're sliding downhill on the cliff face of integrity. He asked, "So what? I deserve punishment? Just because of a video?" A school board member, a history teacher, and former military officer answered calmly, "Not just because of a video, but because it was the only proof that girl had in a system that had already assumed she was wrong, just because her skin wasn't the color of a button-down shirt." For many years, Jefferson High School was known by its slogan, "Where students shine like the stars." But this week, the brightest light didn't come from the students. It came from a 48-second video and a 14-year-old girl with curly hair, a Dora the Explorer backpack, and a memory sharp enough to rival a federal judge. The hearing continued, and this time Madison Daniels, the center of the school universe, was invited to speak. Madison entered the meeting room in a hoodie that read "Black Girl Magic" and a pair of worn but spotless Converse, clean as her self-respect. She didn't say much. She didn't need to. The video had spoken for her. "I just wanted to buy a cookie for my little brother. I forgot my wallet. But he didn't ask anyone else. Just me." Even though 3 other kids were eating snacks too, he didn't question them. Behind Madison stood her mother, Cheryl Daniels, nodding quietly, one hand on her daughter's shoulder, the other holding a phone with an email draft open and ready. Subject line, "Complaint to District Superintendent regarding racial profiling." She wasn't here to stir trouble. She was here to bring clarity. A board member asked, "So you're saying Officer Tucker targeted you because—" Madison lifted her head, eyes steady, unafraid. "Because I'm black, and because I'm a girl." A long silence followed. Officer Tucker, now tieless and loosening his collar, as if the air had gotten 10 degrees hotter, opened his mouth to speak, but was cut off by the PTA attorney. "I think it's best you remain silent for once in your life. Listen instead of commanding." The remark drew a few smirks from parents and a wave of clapping emojis from students watching the live stream in the school media room. Then came Mr. Jamal Reed, the school librarian who had witnessed everything standing to speak. "I've been here 15 years. Never seen anyone questioned over a cookie, unless they threw it at the principal. And Madison? All she did was pick chocolate chip over oatmeal raisin. If that's a crime, I should have been arrested since 2009. The room erupted in laughter, not because the joke was sharp, but because someone finally dared to say what everyone else had been thinking. The school board representative slowly closed her file, her gaze scanning the room. Targeting a student based on race and gender is unacceptable, especially when it happens in a place that should be the safest space for them, school. And today, Madison taught us a lesson this system hasn't reviewed in far too long. No one, not even those in uniform, is above justice. Madison's hand tightened around her mother's. There was no smile on her face, only the calm of someone who knows they've done the right thing. The next day, Officer Tucker entered Jefferson High no longer with the air of authority, but like someone who'd walked into class without zipping up his fly. All eyes were on him, not with respect, but with a mix of curiosity and thinly veiled contempt. Worse, a few students whispered from afar, "That's the cookie cop," still choking on Madison's smite. Hallways in high school spread news faster than district emails, and today's top headline was this: Officer Tucker is under investigation for racial profiling. An internal review had been launched. Security footage, staff testimony, and whispers once left in the shadows were now being dragged into the light like forgotten junk in a storage room. Vice Principal Ramirez, a woman known for being strict but fair, chaired the emergency meeting. As people shuffled their papers, she calmly said, "Funny, Officer Tucker. All last week, you kept urging us to look out for suspicious behavior among students. Turns out, the most suspicious behavior was yours." No one laughed. They didn't need to. The truth was ridiculous enough. Officer Tucker began to defend himself, voice still very white. "I was just following protocol. The girl was acting furtive. I can't be racist if I don't see color." That comment nearly made a teacher choke on their Starbucks. A board member blinked, then politely asked, "So tell me, sir, if the girl had blonde hair, blue eyes, and wore a Ralph Lauren turtleneck, would you have stopped her?" Tucker said nothing. "What if it had been your daughter?" Still, Tucker said nothing. "What if it had been a white boy with 3 cookies in his pocket?" Tucker opened his mouth, but then closed it. In that moment, his silence spoke louder than any defense. Outside the hearing room, Madison and her group of friends, black, white, Latino, and Asian, were putting up new posters for the Respect is Not Optional campaign. Sam, her Puerto Rican friend, patted Madison on the shoulder and joked, "You know, I've never seen anyone take down a cop with just a stare and a cookie." Madison shrugged, smiled. "You've never had my little brother's cookies, worth fighting for." That day, Vice Principal Ramirez's office felt like a mini-set of Law & Order, School Edition. An internal investigation was formally launched, and like most cases, laced with injustice, it all started with a USB drive. Not from Internal Affairs, no. It came from a 10th grader named Malik, resident tech genius and avid security cam hobbyist. He had hacked into the school's surveillance system to make highlight reels of kids dodging surprise quizzes. But this time, Malik found a different kind of footage. One that made him mutter just 3 words. "He's so done." The video captured everything. Madison being stopped by Tucker. No suspicious behavior, no hidden snacks. Just a black girl, smiling, holding a cookie box meant for a teacher. And a white officer with his hand hovering over his gun, scowling, like he'd just spotted the main villain in an action movie. Malik didn't say much. He copied the video to a USB labeled Justice, MP4, and delivered it to the principal's office with a sticky note. If you don't use this, TikTok will. The story exploded. The school board convened an emergency meeting. Local news picked it up. A TV reporter even interviewed Madison on the school lawn. She stood beside her mother, Ayanna, a litigation attorney who smiled while straightening her daughter's collar. What are your thoughts on all of this, Madison? I think if he was hungry, I'd have shared my cookie. But if he hates cookies just because the hand offering it is black, I can wrap it up and mail it to the courthouse. During a board meeting, Officer Tucker was invited to speak. But when Justice MP4 played, he sat frozen like a wax statue during a live portrait sketching session. Vice Principal Ramirez sat upright, her voice softer than a bike tire pump. Officer Tucker, is this the reasonable suspicion you mentioned earlier? Tucker swallowed hard. His eyes darted around. This time, no, I don't see color speeches. The next morning, Madison walked into school wearing a lemon-yellow hoodie that read in bold, "Be kind," or "Be caught on camera." Students applauded, teachers nodded, and the new security guard, a kind Mexican man named Esteban, slipped her a chocolate bar and whispered, "You're the only kid I've seen who made a cop nervous over a cookie." And Tucker? He no longer patrols the school. Suspended, under internal review, and more importantly, enrolled in a bias awareness training course, where he'll spend 8 hours learning the difference between a 13-year-old girl with a cookie box and a Level 1 federal threat. Madison? She had bigger things to do. She was busy organizing an event called Bake for Better, where students of every race and background brought cookies to share with each other and their teachers. A reminder that sometimes societal change starts with a treat and a little kindness. At the end of semester assembly, Principal Jackson took the stage. This year, we didn't just teach math, science, or history. We learned something bigger, that not everyone wearing a badge is always right, and silence does not keep order. Madison was invited to the podium to accept the Student of the Year award. She smiled shyly and said, "I don't think I did anything huge. I just didn't want anyone else to stand there shaking because someone asked, 'What are you hiding in that box?' When all I had was kindness." Her mom, Ayanna, was later invited to speak at a local TEDx talk. She closed with a line that made the whole room stand up and applaud. "One day, Madison will grow up. And I hope by then police won't ask her, 'Who are you?' because of her skin tone. And they'll ask, 'Can you help us rebuild this department?' And just like that, a story that started with a cookie box ended with a truth bomb. One officer fell from a seat of power. One girl became the voice of her generation. Because justice doesn't always wear armor or carry handcuffs. Sometimes justice wears a yellow hoodie, holds a cookie box, and knows how to stand tall when the world puts her in the wrong place.